Coming up on The World Today. Afghan officials say Taliban capture regional capital Zaranj. The IOC expels 2 Belarusian coaches over Kristina Timanouskaya's case. Plus, Greece battles wildfires near Athens and on Evia Island. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin in Afghanistan, where, according to reports, a city in southwestern Afghanistan has become the country's first provincial capital to fall to the Taliban in recent years. Local sources say the insurgents had captured Zaranj in Nimroz province in what would be a major blow to government forces. It comes as the insurgents continue to make rapid advances in the country as foreign troops withdraw. They have taken swaths of countrysides and are now targeting key cities. Other provincial capitals under pressure include Herat in the west and Lakshar Gah in the south. Zaranj is a major trading hub near the border with Iran. Meanwhile, the United Nations says the war in Afghanistan has entered a new, deadlier and more destructive phase, with more than 1,000 civilians killed in the past month during the Taliban offensive.
In the past weeks, the war in Afghanistan has entered a new, deadlier, and more destructive phase. The Taliban campaign during June and July to capture rural areas has achieved significant territorial gains. From this strengthened position, they have begun to attack the larger cities. Just in these 3 cases, I am talking of over 1,000 casualties just in this last month. There had been an expectation when the U.S. Taliban deal was signed in February of 2020, you will remember, that we would see a reduction of violence. We did not. There had been an expectation when the talks between the Afghan Republic and the Taliban began in September of last year, that we would see a reduction of violence. We have not. There had been an expectation that when international troops left, we would see a reduction of violence. We did not. Instead, despite significant concessions for peace, we have seen a 50% increase in civilian casualties, with the certainty of many more as the cities are attacked.
Security analyst David Otto joins us now for more on this. Thank you, David, for speaking to us on the program. Let me begin by asking, how is the Taliban able to make such gains and retake half of Afghanistan, despite the long international presence in the region? I mean, billions of dollars of support and training for the Afghan government forces.
I think, you've got to understand that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, we do remember that before the 9/11 revenge preemptive strike that the U.S. took as a measure to launch attacks in Afghanistan, the Taliban was a government. It was a full functional state, had control of the entire country. So, the bombardment and invasion succeeded. But in terms of the occupation, which the U.S. tried to do, it didn't succeed, because you're fighting against a government that you've taken out of power. So one of the reasons is, it was not going to work in terms of the occupation strategy. Secondly, insurgents or terrorists, as they now call the Taliban, always have time on their side. And the U.S. does not have the same patience as the Taliban does. They are in their country. The U.S. had to withdraw at one point. And even after 20 years, that's what I've been seeing. Popular support is one of the reasons as well why the Taliban is succeeding, because most people do not trust that they can be protected by the Afghan government. So that is also another factor. But also the occupation strategy that the US used in Afghanistan was always going to end up this way. And people knew that once the US leaves, the Taliban is going to come back to power. The Taliban is also supported by groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, even though the Taliban denies these affiliations. Negotiations has been one of the factors. The fact that the US decided to negotiate with the Taliban has given them, that boost in terms of morale that they can continue with the operation. So these are some of the key reasons why we see that the Taliban is now taking up, most of the territory. And, some people say 80%, others say 85%, depending on which side you believe. But definitely, this is the first provincial capital, Zaranj, that has fallen in the hands of the Taliban.
Well, indeed, it does seem like, the Taliban is getting more audacious in its attacks. Just earlier, the director of Afghanistan's Media and Information Center was assassinated by the militants in the capital.
You're very correct. Dawa Khan, head of the government's media, was assassinated. And this comes down to one of the reasons why the Taliban is succeeding, because it does use coercive measures to terrorize the local population. And when people believe that they don't have any kind of protection or sustainable protection from the Afghan government, and also the United States has left, then most people are most likely going to fall behind the support of the Taliban, even though, they do not know how this is going to end.
Well, now, in your assessment, what do you think is the solution to this conflict? Because as it is now, the people are the ones bearing the brunt of all of this.
I think the solution is that, countries have to be very careful, how they invade other countries, but also how you try to occupy it and change the regime. That is one way of, a solution, in terms of recognizing that this was not going to work. I mean, the Soviet Union did suffer the same in the hands of the Taliban. Now, what is going to be sustainable for Afghanistan's, for Afghans is that, they must now go back to the drawing table and see how best they can have some sort of a power sharing negotiation with the Taliban. But because the Taliban feel so emboldened and they believe that they now have the upper hand, they're now dragging their feet. And, we now see that the Qatari negotiation is collapsing gradually. What I think is for the international community to come back to the table and plead with the Taliban to accept some kind of a power sharing government with the Afghan regime. Without that, I don't see any way that the Afghanistan government is going to survive. We will see a repeat of what is happening in Libya, where various factions are claiming control and custody of various areas of the country. That is what is likely going to happen, which is not good for the region at large.
Indeed. Thank you so much, security analyst David Otto.
Thank you.
The Lebanese group Hezbollah has said it fired rockets at open ground near Israeli positions in response to Israeli air raids on southern Lebanon during retaliatory Israeli strikes. The Lebanese army has seized the rocket launcher in southern Lebanon after locals intercepted Hezbollah fighters who earlier fired rockets towards Israeli forces. Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets towards Israeli forces in the disputed Sheba Farms area, saying it had targeted open ground in retaliation for Israeli airstrikes that hit open ground in Lebanon on Thursday. Israel responded with artillery fire into Lebanon. Now, the Iranian-backed and heavily armed Shia group says the Israeli airstrikes had hit open ground in Lebanon. Israel says it does not wish to escalate to a full war, though it is ready for one. Two Belarusian coaches have lost their Olympic accreditations after allegedly attempting to force an athlete to leave the Games in Tokyo. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, confirmed that Arthur Shimak and Yuri Masevich had left the Olympics village and an investigation is underway. The case of Kristina Timanovskaya caught global attention after she refused her team's orders to fly home. She is now in Poland, where she has been granted a humanitarian visa. She says she decided to defect as she was being driven to Tokyo airport because her grandmother had told her that it wasn't safe to return home to Belarus.
We are ready to act whenever something is brought or coming to our attention. I think we have shown clearly with our immediate reaction in this deplorable case of Kristina Timanovskaya. But again, the more so, we are happy that she is safe in Poland, that she is as far as we heard, then also together with her immediate family, with her husband and child, and that the Polish NOC is at her disposal to support her when it comes to her sporting activities.
U.S. President Joe Biden says thousands of Hong Kong residents are to be offered a temporary safe haven in the country. Mr. Biden says because Hong Kong's freedoms are being violated by China, the U.S. would allow visitors to stay for a period of 18 months. China has reacted angrily to the announcement, describing this decision as a gross interference in Hong Kong's internal affairs.
Of forced labor and human rights.
Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more on this. Hello, Maria. This is good news for many Hong Kongers, I assume, but how is the U.S. planning to make this work with angering and straining relations with China without?
Well, the U.S. has put sanctions against China in July, and we know there's been a strain in the relationship for quite some time now, even prior to the Biden administration. So we're very clear on that. And the U.S. has been very clear, even with the Biden administration, that they don't agree with many of the ways in which China has been operating, especially with restricting the autonomy of Hong Kong. And so they believe that what has been done here is a breach against the agreement between Hong Kongers and also the international community. They're upset about the freedom of speech issues that exist, the democratic processing within Hong Kong. And so this is a way for them to say that we are not going to stand by and watch, and we are going to be advocates for the residents of Hong Kong.
Well, thousands of Hong Kong residents are already in the U.S. Are they to benefit from this as well? You know, explain to us, how is this likely to work?
Well, this will be an 18-month temporary non-removal policy that will be in place. And so for the next 18 months, those individuals who are here in the U.S., the majority of the ones that are here will be able to fall under this temporary stay on not having to leave the country. There are others that not quite sure exactly, those individuals that might have to return home, but the majority of the ones that are here now will be able to stay for an additional 18 months. And so that process has begun with Homeland Security. They will also be able to apply for authorization to work during these 18 months while they're here. And so we're expecting this to impact thousands of Hong Kongers and allowing them to be able to take a reprieve here in the U.S. for this 18-month period. And the hope is that during these 18 months, they will be able to then work something out, the U.S. and Hong Kong, and hopefully the U.S. will be able to have the impact that they're hoping to have on the government of China as it relates to Hong Kong.
All right then. Thank you, Maria Bird, our Washington, D.C. correspondent.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead on the program. We meet the record-breaking oldest female powerlifter who's about to turn 100 years old. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Greece has carried out mass evacuations overnight in the northern suburbs of Athens and on the nearby island of Evia as wind whipped up huge wildfires. Thousands left their homes near the Greek capital, which is cloaked in an acrid smoke, and 600 fled Evia by boat. A man has been killed by a falling electricity pylon near Athens. Firefighters from France, Switzerland, Sweden, Cyprus and Romania have all been deployed to assist Greece. Gale force winds are forecast to fan many of the blazes. Meanwhile, in Turkey, a wildfire is also approaching a power station in the southwest, a day after firefighters brought a blaze under control around another nearby plant. The outbreak of wildfires in the country is in its 10th day. Tens of thousands of hectares of forest have been destroyed in Mediterranean and Asian provinces in what President Tayyip Erdogan has called Turkey's worst ever wildfires. 8 people have died and thousands of Turks and tourists have fled. Also in California, fire crews have battled stubborn fires in Greenville, about 160 miles north of Sacramento, after the Dixie Fire roared through the previous night. As apocalyptic images from the burnt-out center of town spread, showing Greenville's quaint main strip in heaps of ashes and debris as smoke rose into the hazy sky. Now, the Dixie Fire has been raging in the area for 3 weeks, burning 322,000 acres and was 35% contained as of Thursday morning. That's according to officials. Now, it's among the more than 12 wildfires burning around the state. It is unclear how many structures have been destroyed in Greenfield as fire crews are still assessing the damage. As the world continues to battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, authorities in 221 countries and territories have reported about 201.2 million COVID-19 cases and 4.3 million deaths. Here's the latest developments on our COVID-19 global update.
7 residents of a nursing home in Belgium have died after being infected with the Colombian variant of the coronavirus in spite of being fully vaccinated. The variant of COVID-19 that originated in Colombia has been detected in recent weeks in the US, but cases in Europe have been rare. So far, scientists do not know if the Colombian variant is more transmissible than other variants. In the Philippines, the Manila capital region has enforced a 3rd COVID lockdown in a bid to contain the spread of the Delta coronavirus variant. Infections in the country exceeded 8,000 a day in the past week, with around 1.6 million cases and more than 28,000 deaths. The Philippines has a second worst outbreak in Southeast Asia after Indonesia. South Korea has announced the extension of social distancing curbs by 2 weeks as the government contends with outbreaks nationwide and more people fall severely ill. The government had tightened restrictions last week across most of the country ahead of the country's peak summer holiday period. Officials say the restrictions are crucial to stamping out cases and ensuring a safe reopening of schools in 2 weeks. The World Health Organization says coronavirus-related deaths in Africa reached a record peak in the week ending August 1st. More than 6,400 deaths were recorded, a 2% rise on the previous week, with South Africa and Tunisia accounting for more than 55% of the fatalities. And finally, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has ruled out the use of rapid antigen testing and mandatory vaccinations. Over 60% of Australia's 25 million citizens are under strict lockdown as the country has battled to contain the latest surges of the COVID Delta strain.
At a hospital in Dakar, health officials are scrambling to control the COVID-19 virus as they battle a third wave that threatens to overwhelm Senegal's hospitals.
At Dalal Jem Hospital in the Senegalese capital Dakar, only the sound of a ventilator and beeps from a monitor indicate that the pregnant woman in intensive care is still alive. A few cubicles down, another woman is on oxygen after giving birth while sick with the coronavirus, as a third wave threatens to overwhelm Senegal's hospitals and some of its cemeteries.
Épuisé physiquement.
We are exhausted, physically exhausted, but above all, emotionally exhausted, because this third wave is above all the wave of youth. There are young people, both men and women, but above all, there are many pregnant women, and that emotionally exhausts us.
Health Ministry figures show Senegal, which until July had recorded fewer than 44,000 COVID cases and 1,666 deaths, has registered more than 20,000 cases and 250 deaths since the start of July. A short drive from the hospital, gravediggers at a Catholic cemetery are struggling to keep up with the number of burials.
Since the third wave arrived, we've been working until 10 p.m., which never happened before. Our workload has increased. Also, before, we did not build the graves the day of the burial. We used to build the graves the day before so that the burial could be done the next day. But if you look at the one behind me, we built it today and buried it today.
And the West African nation is not alone. The World Health Organization said on Thursday that coronavirus-related deaths in Africa reached a record peak last week, partly spurred by the highly transmissible Delta variant.
And finally on the program, great-great-granny Edith Merwe Traina, who is the oldest female competitive powerlifter, is due to turn 100 years old on Sunday. According to the Guinness World Records, Merwe Traina at 99 years old holds the title for the oldest competitive powerlifter female after lifting upwards of 40 to 150 pounds on the competitive powerlifting circuit in her home country of the United States. The Tampa, Florida resident was just a mere 91 years old when she started out weightlifting at her local gym after being invited there by a close friend.
While I was watching those ladies doing their thing, I thought I might just as well, since I was there, so it shouldn't be a total loss, I might just as well pick up a few bars, so I did. And they got to be fun. Bill is getting me ready now to go back to lifting my body and controlling my balance. So I'm expecting that in November I will have another trophy with a whole bunch of applause, and take it from there.
Well, that is just inspiring. That's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Have a great weekend.